Certainly, when you look at consumer spending growing at 11.9%, that was a very strong component. And of course, you also saw that inventory contribution subtracted from economic growth of 1.3%. That, of course, tells you that at some point, when these supply side disruptions wane, inventory will be a positive force for growth in the economy.
So then what about expectations for this third quarter, especially in light of the Delta variant and its impact having on restrictions?
Well, there's no doubt that the Delta variant will slow down economic growth. But remember, trend growth is about 1.8, 1.9%. But when you're growing at 6.6%, if you're slowing, you still have a lot of room to slow without causing any risk to the economy in terms of slipping into a slowdown or a recession. So yes, the economy will slow. Probably in the third quarter, we'll probably see economic growth closer to 5% instead of 6%. But that's still pretty robust growth.
Now, we did see that Dr. Fauci said perhaps spring or even summer of 2022 is when he thinks the U.S. has the possibility of having COVID under control. Should we expect some of these bumps in the road economically until then as well?
I think so, because I think that the medical evidence is coming out. There's not a general consensus, but depending on which medical expert you talk to, they're telling us that vaccines are really good for about 6 to 8 months. But after that, you need some sort of a booster shot. You certainly see that in Israel, and you're now starting to see that in the United States. So until people start getting these boosters, dealing with hesitancy and things like that, we will see bumps along the road in the overall economy, because you'll tend to see infections arising from time to time, as we're seeing them been rising over the last couple of weeks.
And I want to shift gears now and look at unemployment claims. We saw that they increased slightly this week for the first time in more than a month. What should we read into that in terms of the overall health of the labor market?
Well, I think we have to be watching them closely, but a number like 353,000 is still very, very close and not statistically significantly different from what we've been seeing. And let's not forget that earlier in the year, in January, we had these claims numbers over 900,000. So they're still pretty close to the pandemic lows, the pre-pandemic lows that we saw. So I would not get nervous over 353,000. And remember, we are going to end a lot of the pandemic initial claims, extra money, enhanced benefits. So that may nudge some people to go back to work, and that will put downward pressure on these claims over the next month or so.
And that is important context, considering how far we've come at the peak of the pandemic, with the numbers soaring, as you mentioned, in the 900,000s. I want to talk now about the significance of what the House and Senate are attempting to pass with this massive infrastructure bill and budget reconciliation.
I think those things are very important for the economy. I don't think I have met either a Democrat or a Republican that would tell me that we don't need infrastructure. So clearly they're important. We need them. In terms of stimulus, though, the impact is going to be minor, because remember that during the pandemic, sometimes we used to spend $3 trillion, $2 trillion, and we would spend it in 2 months. Now we're talking about numbers that are a fraction of that, and they certainly will be spent over the next 5 to 8 years. So the impact on the overall economy year to year is going to be a lot less.
Now, I want to shift gears and also look at U.S. inflation. We know that economists seem to be sort of split on how concerned we should be. What are your thoughts?
I am concerned, because whenever we see inflation way above the threshold target of 2%, you have to be concerned. But you have to admit, and most people will, that the inflation numbers that we're seeing today are largely dominated by the leisure and hospitality, whether it be airfares, car rentals, things like that. All those things are associated with the reopening of the overall economy. Not to say that some of it is not structural, but a lot of it is transitory. My guess is that the underlying inflation rate today is probably somewhere between 3 and 3.5%, and not the 7+% that we're seeing in the producer price index. Still too high. I'm still concerned, but not overly concerned.
And just very quickly, we have about 20 seconds. What issues are you hoping really get addressed at these Jackson Hole meetings?
I think at Jackson Hole, they have to tell us that sometime between now and the end of the year, the Federal Reserve will begin to taper. There's no need to have the type of expansionary monetary policy that we had during the pandemic, given that so many workers have come back to work.